What should I eat on my long run? Well, the short answer is that you should eat about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour on your long run. However, as we know, it's easier said than done. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my troubles with fueling my long runs and how I managed to overcome them, and see if that can offer some insights to you on how you might be able to better fuel your long runs. So back when I was training for my first marathon, I had trouble with bonking on my long runs. And for those of you who don't know, it's this feeling of extreme fatigue, like you just can't keep going. It's not so much that you're out of breath or that your muscles are too sore. You just seem to lack the energy to continue. It's often referred to as bonking. And I was really frustrated because I was just getting to that point in the training where the runs were getting longer and going over 2 hours. And I was thrilled that my body was holding up for the first time to these longer runs. The problem was with this bonking, I wasn't sure that I'd be able to keep going because I knew my marathon pace was probably going to have me finish around sort of 4.5 hours if I kept going the way I was. And I knew that at around 2.5 hours in my long runs, I was really struggling to keep going. As with most things that I did when I first got into running, I decided that I would just train and be fit enough that I didn't need to drink sports drinks or eat gels. I saw other runners doing those things, but I didn't really understand why. And I thought, well, if I just get fit enough, I won't need to do those things. And the idea of eating or drinking sports drinks on long runs or just on any kind of run didn't appeal to me, so I just didn't do it. But after repeated episodes of this bonking on the long runs, I decided to do a little research online and try and find out what was going on and how I might be able to fix it. So why do we need to eat gels or sports drinks or whatever it is on our long runs? The reason is that when we run for a long time, anything longer than about 45 minutes, we start to deplete the glucose and glycogen in our body. So the glucose is in our blood and the glycogen is in our muscles. And we essentially burn that to use it for our muscles burn it to use it for energy to propel us forward as we're running. The trouble is, if we keep running for long enough, we will deplete those supplies to a level where we can't sustain that same intensity and we'll have to slow down as we switch to burning fats more so than burning glucose in order to keep going. I talked about this at length in my episode with Bob Murray, which was about understanding glycogen metabolism. So you'll have to scroll back a little bit in the feed to check that one out. But that goes into a lot of depth about the actual physiology of why we need to fuel our long runs and other harder workouts. But to sum up, Bob said that any workout longer than about 45 minutes, we would probably benefit from some type of fueling. The reason being that it would allow us to continue at that same intensity throughout the workout and thus increase our adaptation and our fitness stimulus. The other added benefit, which I discussed with sports dietitian Stephanie Small in my episodes with her on fueling for your long runs, is that when we fuel during our runs, we will top up our glycogen and glucose supplies on the run or stop them depleting quite as much. And this stops us from binge eating or overeating in the hour or two following the workout, which is apparently quite common. And both experts that I had on the podcast actually agreed on the range that we should aim for, and it's this 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So that's usually what I recommend and what I personally go for when I'm doing my long runs. So the approach I used to address this problem of not fueling my long runs is what I recommend for my athletes now, and what I'm going to share with you today. It's pretty simple. What we're going to do, we're going to initially find something that you can eat on the long run. That's the first step. The second step is you're going to document on every long run what you ate and how many grams of carbs you had in that run. And then you're going to gradually build up until you're hitting about 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour from foods that you find you can tolerate during the run. If you're doing longer events, things like marathons that might have you running 3, 4, even 5 hours, then you would go for the top end of the range towards 60 grams per hour in your training long distance runs. And if you're doing shorter events like 10Ks, half marathon, you can get away with being at the lower end near that 30 grams of carbs per hour. To put that in perspective, most gels that you buy will have between 20 and 30 grams, usually closer to 20. So to hit 30 grams of carbs per hour, you would have 1.5 gels to 3 gels per hour for that range. And this, as I was trying to start fueling my long runs, once I realized that this was part of the reason I was bonking, I was essentially running out of energy. I tried to start eating gels, and I would try and go for this 2 or 3 gels per hour. The problem was that they were making me nauseous. I really didn't like the taste of them, and I tried lots of different kinds. I just couldn't seem to find anything I could tolerate well. And the other thing that really annoyed me is it was getting quite expensive because each gel was costing me about $3, and it was about 3 gels per hour. And then a lot of my runs were 2 or 3 hours. So on a 3-hour long run, that's 3 gels per hour. At $3 per gel, that comes to $27 to go for that run. And then you got to do it again next week. So you might be looking at over $100 a month just for gels, which is kind of annoying. So I wanted to try something else, and I was particularly interested in trying some kind of whole food. At the time, I felt like it would be better for me to do that. I think differently now. So at the time, I thought, well, a whole food would be better because whole foods are generally better. Actually, that's not quite the case because what we're looking for on our long runs is an easy access to that carbohydrate, to that glucose. So having things like dates, which is what I settled on, which has a bunch of fiber mixed in with it, actually makes things a little bit more difficult to get the glucose into the right place. And it's actually a bit simpler to use things like gels and sports drinks because I'm not really concerned with health at that time. I'm going to burn off all those calories anyway, so I might as well just get it in the simplest form possible. Anyway, the dates went pretty well. This was the first thing I started to have some success with. And it worked out about, I think 4 dates was about 30 grams of carbs. So I would aim for about 4 dates every 30 minutes. And this worked pretty well in terms of I could tolerate it quite well. I did have to make sure I had some water with the dates to not have it be too sticky. However, I found they were quite impractical. When I would try and carry them, they would take up a lot of space. So that was annoying. And at the time I was training, it was quite warm. It was a warm time of year. And the dates would get really sticky in the sandwich bag. And they were kind of annoying to take out. My fingers were sticky. It was irritating. So then I experimented a little bit with like gummies, Cliff Blocks and that kind of things. And even Twizzlers, which were actually quite successful. What I found with the gummies is that, again, they were kind of difficult to take out of the packet and eat during the run as I'm kind of bouncing up and down. But they did work very well, both the regular gummies and the Twizzlers, for biking. I also experimented with trying to get to 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour from sports drinks. So I tried Gatorade, and Gatorade it's about, depending on which one you buy, it's about 30 grams of carbs in a 500 milliliter bottle, which is the kind of size of a typical running sports bottle that you would buy. A couple of problems I found with that. One is on colder days, when I was training at colder times of year, it was too much fluid and I kept needing to stop to pee. And on warmer days, it wasn't enough. So the fluid wasn't right. And as I learned more about electrolytes and sodium replenishment, I was looking for something that had a sodium ratio that was more similar to sweats. So things like LMNT or Precision Hydration tend to have a higher sodium concentration, whereas the Gatorade was a bit lower. So I found, although it did work for the most part, it wasn't very flexible. And something Andy Blow recommended, who is from Precision Fuel and Hydration, when he came on the show, was to try and separate out your fuel and hydration so that you can change those independently. So you can turn the knobs depending on what the conditions require. And then the last thing I tried that worked quite well is I found a website that had a bunch of DIY gels. It was from a website called Road Bike Rider. And I've since shared this link with a bunch of my clients, and I'll put it in the show notes for this episode. And that had a bunch of DIY gels on that usually involve like maple syrup mixed with various things like coffee and some other things. And I found the maple syrup with coffee DIY gel worked quite well for me, and I would just mix it up in a regular sports drink bottle. And then one day when I didn't have any maple syrup, I used table syrup because it was in the fridge and it didn't taste as good, but it didn't cost as much. So I started using that. And one day when I'd forgotten to make some coffee in advance to do it, and I just wanted to get out and have my run, I diluted the table syrup with some Gatorade, and that worked quite well. So I'd figured out my own DIY gel that was actually, it's not nice, but it's tolerable to me. And it was cheap. So I was quite happy with that, especially for longer training runs when I didn't have to buy 3 gels per hour per run. I could just use the DIY gel and then kind of supplement with other things like gels and dates to make a formula that worked for me for each long run. And nowadays, I don't really have any trouble with bonking anymore. I fuel any workout that is longer than 60 minutes usually. Anything shorter than 60 minutes, like the interval runs and that kind of stuff, I'll use Gatorade because it's simple and easy and it allows me to top up my glucose and glycogen without having to fiddle around making gels and all that kind of stuff. For the longer runs, especially anything longer than 90 minutes, I'll use my DIY gel. Maybe I'll usually have some packet gels that I'll take along with me for different flavors. I'll also often have some dates, maybe just for one of the hours to have something solid. And I find the combination of mixing those things seems to work quite well for me and allows me the flexibility for on different days when my stomach is reacting differently, I can use different fueling sources. And the reason I wanted to record this episode and try and convey my own journey with fueling, which is going much better now, and I will talk about my journey with hydration in a different episode. As you can see, just getting the instruction 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour doesn't really illustrate the difficulty of the practical implementation of that. Along this journey, I did have a lot of trouble with nausea, with cramping in my stomach, and other kinds of things where it would make it difficult to just get those 30 to 60 grams in. However, as you can see, I just kept experimenting with different things and found things that seemed to work for me and retained those, and I let go of things that really didn't suit me. And with this process of iteration, you should be able to find a fueling strategy that works well for you for your long runs. And then you just want to follow those guidelines. So any workout, definitely longer than an hour, you want to be fueling. You want to aim for 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. And the way I'd suggest you approach this is, first of all, to start experimenting with different fueling sources. See the ones that you can tolerate. Then fuel all of your runs longer than an hour, definitely your long run, and record on the notes for that run how you felt and exactly what you ate and how many grams of carbs were in that, so that you know the total grams of carbs per hour for that run. Now, this can actually be a fairly difficult process that can take quite a while. That process that I described for me probably took 12 months or so of experimentation, maybe even a little bit longer, but I have found something. I have a specific fueling strategy that works well for me now. And if you're having trouble with bonking on your long runs or anything like that, and you would like some help to work through this in a more timely fashion, just click the link in the description and you can book a call and we'll have a chat about it, see if we might be able to help you.